We are now officially out of Los Angeles. We got a brand spanking new 1986 prison bus, and we are 300 miles from San Francisco.
Yay!
Woohoo! Over.
I'm gonna need another pee break. Over.
No!
You just paid like 10 minutes ago.
Got a baby sitting on my bladder. Sorry, not sorry. Over.
Carol, I'm a month further along than you, and I don't have to pee as much.
This is not the time for petty jealousy, Erica. Over.
Hey, I haven't heard from Gale in a while.
Hey, Galebird, you out there?
How's that self-driving car treating you?
Mary Steenburgen, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, guys.
I am such a fan. I normally don't get flabbergasted around anybody, but I am such a fan of yours. I've been watching you and things for so long. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm very grateful.
You have such great taste in projects, Last Man on Earth including. You know, going back to, I think the first thing that comes to mind is working with Will Ferrell on Step Brothers, which is such a great comedy movie. Is this just people that you like, that you are attracted to working with? Did you know Will beforehand? How did this come to you?
Well, there's the two Wills, Forte and Ferrell. Yes. But Will Ferrell and I met when I played his stepmom in Elf. Oh. And then when they were going to do Step Brothers a couple of years later. And we had an amazingly fun time on Elf. So a couple of years later, he called and he said, you know, I'm only 11 years older than you. Would you be offended if I asked you to play my actual mom? And I said, I'd be offended if you ask anybody else to play your mom. And so we did Step Brothers together, it was like one of the great experiences of my life. I mean, it was a great experience for everybody. People used to come and sit there to just watch us shoot. And filming is notoriously boring. It's like watching paint dry. But that movie, we did so much improv that you never knew what was going to happen next. And people used to just come sit there like it was theater and watch all day, you know. And there's at least 4 shots in Step Brothers where you can full on see I'm laughing. And
that made it in the movie?
Yeah, and I asked Adam McKay, I said, why did you use that take that show you can see I'm laughing? And he goes, Mary, we have no takes that you're not laughing in those. So I'm pretty bad about giggling. That's been a problem, especially on stage. But
you work so much in comedy.
I know. I'm a laugh junkie. I do. I love funny people. I love watching them, being around them, marrying them. I just like to laugh. I mean, I occasionally love a great dramatic scene, but you know, honestly, the only way to do those scenes is to go someplace pretty dark. And I just kind of love being in the light, you know, I really do. And I love being around funny people. So Last Man on Earth is pretty much heaven to me.
And how did that come to you? How did this Will from Last Man on Earth come to you?
Well, I was a huge fan of his from Saturday Night Live and from Nebraska, which I thought he was that was such a brilliant performance. And but I really didn't know him. And I got this call, would I come do this show that they'd done a few episodes that hadn't aired yet called Last Man on Earth. And I said, well, what's the character? And they said, well, they don't really have a character. We don't know what she's going to be. And I don't usually like doing that. I actually like having the words first, me doing the adjustment rather than someone trying to guess at writing for me. I often find that backfires. But anyway, I went and my manager and I went to Fox and they screened the first 2 episodes, the pilot and the next episode for us. And 10 minutes into the pilot, I whispered to her, I'm doing this. I don't care who the character is. I don't care. I just want to do this with these people. And this was only when just Will was the only character. But it was, you have to realize that everything about the world we've created is so different, at least from an actor's point of view. Like, we don't have regular lighting because there's virtually no electricity, so everything had to be invented. And I feel like everybody on Last Man on Earth, from our brilliant set designers to the costume people to the camera work and everything, everybody brings their A game because you're kind of in uncharted territory. And it's really cool because Mike Shore, who did Parks and Recreation and who just created the show my husband Ted Danson's on now, called The Good Place, he and several other writers have come up to me and said, that we all got inspired by Last Man on Earth to sort of bring our craziest, wildest ideas that we didn't think could ever get made. And
that's right. And The Good Place takes place in the afterlife, or like in
right.
between the afterlife, right?
Well, you just keep watching and you'll find it where you. Yeah.
Clearly, you know something about The Good Place that I don't. And Last Man on Earth has such, I mean, that makes sense that Mike Schur would say that because it has such a distinct point of view. There is no other show like Last Man on Earth, not just from the place of where the show started, where it's at the end of the world, but even just the fact that in this season, Will has fake eyebrows.
Right, which if you didn't see the episode that explains why Will has fake eyebrows, people must just be going, what the hell is up with his eyebrows?
I think even if you did see that episode.
Well, maybe if you did see it, but that's, first of all, Will has no boundaries. I've figured this out. Like most of us have like, don't do this around me or don't do that around me or don't show me like this. Will has no boundaries. So, like, he decided that Jason Sudeikis, who was his brother, should shave as a prank, shave half his head, his eyebrow, half his beard, and half of everything else. You can use your imagination. And we started getting nominated for awards, and so we all had to go to these awards things in Hollywood with this insane-looking person who only looked sane if you saw half his face in profile, either bald or hairy. And so, but he had no problem with that at all. He's just utterly creatively free.
And your character, Gale, on the show, last night we saw her sort of finally have a moment where she says, I don't need to this isn't my family. We just got stuck together. Where can we expect her to go from there?
The next group of shows for Gale has been one of the most unique things I've ever done in my whole career. And I can't say what happens, but you find out a lot more about why she's the way she is. And you certainly, it's just, this adventure gets crazier and wilder and more strange and wonderful.
How does that work for you as an actress on the show? Do they come to you and say, hey, we really want to flesh out Gale this season. We're thinking episodes, this, and this. We're going to really flesh out her character. Or do you just sort of get scripts and are like, oh, we're fleshing out my character. This is great.
It's kind of more the latter. I have to say, when I was younger, I don't know, maybe I would have been more insistent that you do this and that and this and that for me. I don't feel that way anymore. I feel really, when you're my age and you're in an amazing thing, you know how lucky you are and you're grateful. And so for me, I've had the writers come up to me, and these are incredible writers, and they'll go, we're really writing some great stuff for you. And I'm like, I'm probably the happiest person on this show. Like when I have a day off because you didn't write something for me, I actually have a really good day. So I'm like, fine. But they have stepped up and done some extraordinary stuff. And I got to do crazy stuff last season. I mean, I performed surgery on Boris Kujo and give him an appendectomy. Sadly, he did die. But it's just, I'm creatively so thrilled and honored to be a part of this amazing group of actors and writers and crew people. I just could not be happier.
You mentioned your husband, actor Ted Danson, a few minutes ago, and I have to say, I don't pay attention to quote-unquote famous couples or anything like that, or have investment in them, but
good, that's healthy of you.
What I'm going to say,
because they usually don't stick around too long.
Well, that's what I was going to say, except for maybe you and your husband, Ted Danson. You're one of the few where if anything happened, I might be brokenhearted. I'd be like, well, love clearly doesn't exist. Mary and Ted aren't together anymore.
I know, that would be sad. I would be sad. So the good news is love still does exist.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Well, I saw you on the Today Show this morning, and you were essentially saying that he's everything that you have ever wanted in a man. What are those things? What are those things that he brought that you feel so lucky about, that make you feel so confident in everything?
You know, the first time I met him was at an audition, which I had the part, and he was auditioning to play opposite me, and he didn't get the part. And we were both married to other people, and it was not our moment in life yet to know each other. But I do remember my first impression of him because that was pre-Cheers. So I remember looking at him and thinking, now that is a very handsome man that has no clue that he's handsome, and he's funny. And I remember just putting those things together, and then boom, it was gone, you know. And then I saw him on Cheers, and it was like, holy cow, that guy's gifted, because what they all did on Cheers was just like the most brilliant form of ice skating, you know, so delicate, so precise. It's so much harder to do great comedy like that than it is to do drama, in my opinion, because it's less forgiving, you know. And I was just in awe of them.
It is less forgiving. That's interesting that you said that, because Last Man on Earth as well would be less forgiving, because you guys don't even have the laugh track that Cheers had then. I mean, you guys really have to hit those beats and hit those marks. It's far less forgiving. Do you feel that when you're shooting Last Man?
I always feel that with comedy, but that's why I love it, because I feel like sometimes I do it, and sometimes I feel like, boy, I like totally whiffed that. And I feel that watching it, and I feel that as I'm doing it. And to be honest with you, that's part of the lure of it, because if I felt that I had accomplished something in life that I still had nothing left to learn, I wouldn't be as interested as I am. And I'm intrigued every day I go to work to try to be a better actor, you know. And I think there may be, is there anyone here from the neighborhood Playhouse? Because I invited, these guys are from my alumni school. So I studied with the great Sandy Meisner, who was the teacher at their school many, many years ago. And I still like to go back there. My friend Pamela Muller-Karaman, who's over there, runs this school, and she and I were in a comedy improv group when we got out of school. We got out of the neighborhood Playhouse and ready to, you know, be on Broadway. And a year later, the phone hadn't rung, so we just the 5 of us formed a comedy improv group called Cracked Tokens. And we eventually became the resident company of the Manhattan Theater Club. But before that, we did shows for halfway houses for people trying out from booze. And it was fantastic training, because if you can make them laugh, you can make anybody laugh. And
I was going to say, a lot of laughs.
We did comedy improv for them, and inevitably they would say, we'd pass out these cards, and they would write down what they wanted to see. It would be 2 drunks on a street corner, 2 drunks on a bus. They just wanted to see themselves, so, you know, and I'm still playing a drunk. How do you like that?
I was just imagining like an improv group trying to get stories from the audience. And
I know.
Like, too dark, sorry, not going to go there. Nope, not going to do that either. You're a musician now. You're a newly founded, newly groomed musician. It's incredible.
It's a crazy story. I'll try to tell it super quickly.
Don't tell it quickly. You told it to me in the green room. It's amazing.
So I had a normal relationship for music my whole life, which means I appreciated it. I took some piano lessons when I was a little girl. I wasn't very good at it. I stopped playing the piano completely and didn't touch it again. And then when I was 54 years old, I had a minor surgery on my right arm, but I had to have general anesthetic for the surgery. And when I came out from the surgery, I heard music. But when I say I heard music, I mean I heard music all day, all night. So if I saw a street sign, the sign would turn into a song, or just there would be a melody attached to it, or people would talk to me, and I would almost hear what they said as music. It was very strange and very disorienting and very scary. And I think my husband and my children were a little bit worried about it. And after about 2 months of wanting my old brain back and trying to figure out what the hell was going on, and people giving me this book by Dr. Oliver Sacks called Musicophilia, that I guess is the name for it, I finally realized this is not going away. So you have to make this work for yourself. So at the age of 54, I started studying music and studying songwriting. And then I anonymously sent, I worked with a musician. I have zero desire to be a singer, by the way, although occasionally I sing on TV shows or movies. But I'm sort of mediocre, if you ask me. But anyway, I sent my songs that I wrote with someone, a guy sang them, and we sent them to a big music lawyer. And he called my manager and goes, I want to sign that kid. And my manager goes, yeah, kid's not going to quite describe her, but I'll send her over. To make a long story short, I was signed to Universal Music Publishing Group, and they sent me to Nashville. And to this day, I now go to Nashville and write music with some of the best writers in Nashville.
And you formed a group. There we go. And you formed a lovely group called Mooney and the Intoxicators, and we actually have a clip
Mooney and the
of you guys performing. Let's take a look at that clip of Mooney and the Intoxicators.
I broke up with the man and the moon last night, and he didn't shed a tear. He still hangs around when the sun goes down, and he acts like not even here. So lovers beware, 'cause he's way up there, a million miles away. His heart is a crater, and sooner or later yours is bound to break.
So I did take up the accordion, which happened because we were in McCabe's music on Valentine's Day, and my husband hadn't gotten me anything. And he said, is there anything in here you'd like me to get you? And I said, I'll take that little green accordion. And he said, okay. And then he says, he thought to himself, as if she's ever going to learn to play that. But I'm obsessed with it. I play it on Last Man on Earth. So.
How long did it take you to get comfortable with the accordion?
I'm not comfortable yet. I'm not very good, but I'm passionate. It's kind of like me as a singer. Not very good, but very passionate.
Where do you play around the house, and did you have to find a spot like away from everybody else?
We converted our garage into my little tap dancing and music room. It's like if people could see what goes on in that room, they would not believe it.
It's one of those weird things, because when you learn how to play music as a little kid, you don't care who you disturb. You're like, I'm going to play my drums in my bedroom, Mom. I don't care if you get mad. But as an adult, you're kind of like, oh, I don't want to.
Well, the accordion is quite a confront. It's not like it's a subtle instrument. And I'm a little worried about the people next door. But here's what I want to say about learning something like that. There's no point in all of you guys getting older if all it means is that doors shut to you and you don't get to try new stuff and you don't get to scare yourself to death. Like, to me, what happened in that surgery is insignificant. I think it actually just somehow opened a channel to the brain I've always had. My grandmother was extremely musical and played every instrument, but more importantly, I said yes to it, even though I knew people would make fun of me, and I knew that people would go, what? And you're too old to do that, or, you already have a career doing something else, or believe me, every response you could say, I've said to myself and people have said to me. But my point is, why even be here if you're not going to keep growing and scare yourself to death and do new things? So I feel, like there's a lot of things I want to try that I've never tried.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I want to go back to your comedy improv roots that you were talking about a few minutes ago with your classmates here.
We have a third of the group sitting right here.
Were the early parts that you got in movies, they were a little more dramatic or straddled the line between comedy and drama? Is that true?
You know, my very first movie was a movie with Jack Nicholson called Going South. And that was a sort of very quirky, very strangely comedic movie. It was very odd, and music by Van Dyke Parks, who's just magnificent. And and then my second movie was a movie called Time After Time, which was more of a drama, but it's a time travel drama. So I sort of bounced all over the place, and they did keep trying to put me. Then I did Ragtime, and they said, "Oh, she's a dramatic actress," and now I get called comedian, and they don't think of me for drama. And I just find in general, it's like I'm an actor. I just do what comes to me, but I do like to laugh, you know. So if I'm drawn to one, it's certainly more to comedy.
Well, I was telling you in the green room that one of my favorite films of yours, one of your early roles, is this Jonathan Demme movie, Melvin and Howard, which I think, were you nominated for?
No, I won. I won an Oscar for that.
You won an Oscar for
actually, and a
Melvin.
Golden Globe and a lot of other things, because it was so freaking brilliantly directed and brilliantly written by the great Bo Goldman and Jonathan Demme, who's still just putting out the most extraordinary. He just did a movie with Justin Timberlake that I can't wait to see, and he's really an extraordinary director.
And what was it like shooting Melvin and Howard? Because that is a great example of straddling the line between drama and comedy.
Completely.
Your character is so heartbreaking but strong and resilient and sort of goofy at times. You do so much in that movie as an actress.
That was a great role. I mean, in the original script, they said, you know, that my character would go on a game show, and he said, "Do you have a talent that you want to do on the game show?" And my character is also a stripper, and she stripped to the tune "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." And I said, "Well, I think I should tap dance to the same tune I stripped to, which is I Can't Get No Satisfaction." And he's like, "Yes." And so I worked out this whole tap dance, and then on the day I did it, and then Jonathan said, "That's really cool. Now I want you to throw all that out, and I just want you to dance." And I was scared to death, but then I looked down at the dolly guy, George, who was this big guy, and he was looking at me expectantly, and I thought, wow, George doesn't know where we're going to go, because I don't know where we're going to go, but he was going to be my partner, you know, like my dance partner. And I just thought, well, if George can do it, I can do it. So I just started dancing, and that's what he used. I ended up doing like the splits and everything else, and it was...
You had choreographed something, and he wanted just total spontaneity.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And that's Jonathan. Jonathan's kind of brilliant. He's shot a lot of concert films, and he's brilliant at using what's there, and he's very alive. And it was... I also worked with him in the movie Philadelphia, but he's just astounding.
Absolutely. Let's open it up to the audience for some questions. Who has questions out there?
Hi. So one of my favorite movies that you were in was What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I was wondering what it was like working on that movie with younger Johnny Depp and Leo DiCaprio.
It was very hard because my whole part was mainly kissing and making out with Johnny Depp. And it was just difficult. I offered to give my salary back to them, but I got to keep it. No, that was a great script by the great writer Peter Hedges, and then Lasse Hallström directed it, who had done films that I loved so much, and I never anticipated getting to work with him. So that was fun. We shot that down just outside of Austin, Texas. And Leo DiCaprio, who plays Arnie in that film, who's developmentally disabled in the film, was so real and so stayed in character that local people asked us how in the world he had been able to memorize all those lines. And we're like, well, he's a special guy, and he was wonderful. But I love Johnny Depp in that movie. Johnny had the hardest part in the movie because he really takes us through that journey, and he was wonderful in it.
It's really one of the last times that we sort of got to see Johnny Depp play the straight man, or a
Right.
version of the straight man. You know,
Right.
his entire role in that movie is passive, which is really difficult for actors to sort of ground the movie in passivity.
It's hard, and I think he loves the magic of make-believe and the extravagance of that, and he does it really, really well. But he was also so simple and true in Gilbert Grape, and perhaps he'll do more things like that. I don't know. I just think he's a magnificent actor.
Absolutely. Next question, right here.
Hey, Mary. So, looking back at your illustrious career, is there like a role that you would like to maybe go back to, maybe add something to it?
I wouldn't mind Step Brothers 2 because that would be so much fun. Because the idea of those two guys still living at home, would be so kind of ridiculous.
There were rumors, right?
There have been consistently rumors, but we've crossed a line, Will Ferrell and I, because if you're an ardent watcher of Last Man on Earth, you will have noticed that he did one scene in the beginning of season 2 of Last Man on Earth, and he plays my lover. And he is literally scared to death by Kristen Schaal, who pops up, and he doesn't think there's anyone left on Earth, and she pops up and literally scares him to death. And in the mourning of him, and in my desperation that it never happen again to anybody, I demonstrate on a CPR dummy that I've dressed to look like him how to do CPR. And I'm so lonely, I become attached to this CPR dummy, who I've now started to call Gordon, who is supposed to be Will Ferrell. So that's probably way more than I should have told you. You should just go back and look at it. But
I just love how dark this show is.
It is so dark. It's so dark. I've had more makeout scenes with that dummy. I really have. But I will say he's a better kisser than a few leading men I've had, not to name names. Okay.
Names? No, don't do that. I think we have time for two more questions. Next question, right here.
Hello, I just wanted to know, when you're doing improv, has it gotten easier as the years go on doing improvisation? And also, when you're in the middle of doing improv, do you ever get stuck or tongue-tied or lost your train of thought?
All of the above, all the time. I mean, I've done this with people who are so much better than me at it. I mean, I think in Step Brothers, one of the good things I realized right away, I remember on the first day just thinking, I cannot do what these guys are doing. I mean, these guys are brilliant at it. And then I realized, well, I'm not really supposed to do what these guys are doing. I'm actually here to provide some semblance of reality to the fact I am supposed to be like his mom, But I try to take as much pressure off myself when I'm doing improv and just try to work off the other person, which is what we learned at the Neighborhood Playhouse, that if your attention's all on yourself and trying to be funny and brilliant and clever and outdo somebody, there's nothing more stifling than that. But if you put all your attention on the other person, that's when magic at least has a chance of happening. So that's what I try to do.
I think we have time for one more question right here.
Hi, Mary. I heard that you know Hillary Clinton. That's so cool and exciting. Can you kind of speak to your relationship with her, and how do you know her?
Well, I'm from Arkansas, and I did my first movie, and I got a phone call from my dad, and my dad said, and this is 38 years ago, and my dad said, I want you to meet somebody. And I said, who? And he goes, I want you to meet the governor and first lady. And I was like, how in the world did you know the governor and first lady? My dad was a freight train conductor, and we didn't have any money, and we didn't travel in the circles where you just hung out with the governor. But I guess Bill Clinton, who was governor then, had spoken to the retired railroad workers about mentoring young people. And he's talking, and he says, well, we have a young woman in our very community, and she's made her first movie, and it just shows you, all the talent that's in this area. and he sees someone wiping his eyes, and he finishes his speech, and he goes out, and he goes up to the man and goes, "Sir, I see my remarks have touched you in some way. I'm Bill Clinton. I'd like to meet you." And the man said, "Well, I'm Mary Steenburgen, and if you're going to talk about my daughter, I think you ought to meet her." And that's, so when people say the Hollywood connection, I'm like, no, it was a freight train conductor, Arkansas freight train conductor connection. And we met, and a month after I met her, she called and said, "I loved meeting you so much. I'd love to work on a project with you." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Well, children are dying in parts of our state because they live so remotely, they don't make it to a hospital in time. They need care, and they die before they can get to a hospital." And I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And she goes, "Let's raise money for a helicopter." And so, boom, we started raising money for a helicopter for the Arkansas Children's Hospital. And that was 38 years and about 100 projects ago that I've worked on with her. And now she perhaps will be our next president. I hope so anyway.
That's absolutely incredible. I have to say, it's so nice to hear a story about Hillary Clinton that goes back that far, because she says these things that she's done since then, and as a supporter, I believe her, but so many people are sort of chalk that up as to sort of cynical politics. It's so wonderful to hear somebody sort of say, no, I was there. We did do all of these things.
You know what? She doesn't remember a tenth of it. She really doesn't, because it's so much more. The Children's Defense Fund and things that she did for years. But like, I bet she has rarely told that, you know, I took my friend Elizabeth Glazer, who was dying of AIDS, to the White House because Elizabeth wanted to save her son before she had, unbeknownst to her, contracted AIDS in a blood transfusion and passed it on to both her children. Her daughter died. Her son was still alive. And there were no drugs at that time for children. They hadn't tested them for children. They existed, but they wouldn't give them to kids because they hadn't tested them for dosage and efficacy. So she said, "Can you take me to meet the First Lady?" And I said, "Yeah." And we went there, and Hillary that day started changing things, making the pharmaceutical companies test. And he's still alive today, and he counts Hillary as the reason he's alive. And I count him that way too. I don't know if Hillary's ever said that in a speech. Maybe she has. I doubt it. I've never heard it. There are hundreds of stories I could tell you like that. And she's not the best person at selling herself in the world, to be honest with you. But who she is, it's not the poetry of speaking, it's the poetry of doing. That's what I say about her. She's a worker. And I'm extremely proud to be her friend.
I'm extremely proud to be her supporter. Thank you so much, Mary Steenburgen. Not exactly sure how to pivot to telling people to watch Last Man on Earth on Sunday nights.
She would love that. Trust me. Just pivot away.
Last Man on Earth airs on Sunday nights. What time on Sunday nights?
9:30 on Sunday night.
And it truly is one of the funniest shows on TV. And how can people hear Mooney and the Intoxicators?
I think we're, if we're not up on iTunes today, we should be. And we'll, we're just making it up as we go along.
Mary Steenburgen, everybody. Mary, thank you so much. Thank you.